I've spent the past year working on an MMORPG for the Nintendo 3DS, and today I'm proud to announce I'm giving up. Just kidding. Well, sort of. I haven't given up, but I did need a break, and besides, there was still some unfinished business that was haunting me. That's right, I wasn't ready to let go of my previous game, Arenji Monsters. Originally, Arenji Monsters started out as a card-based auto-battler for the GameCube, but the more I played it, the more I realized it just felt so much better playing on my phone instead, so I scrapped the console version and released it for Android on itch.io. But deep down, I always felt guilty. I wanted Arenji Monsters to exist as a console homebrew game, and I had abandoned that vision. So I decided to revisit Arenji Monsters and port it to the 3DS. And considering it's a handheld, the 3DS is ideal for short pick-up-and-play sessions, so maybe it would be okay. But the most important thing to me was establishing proof that Octave, my game engine, can be used to create homebrew games. That was the driving force behind this port. So I was ready to begin the porting process, but first there was a huge problem. Arenji Monsters was built on an ancient version of the engine, before I had done the huge node refactor, which converted all actors and components to just singular nodes. And there were a lot of other improvements in the newer versions of Octave, and I wanted to have that for Arenji Monsters. So I went ahead and continued with the engine upgrade, and that meant fixing everything. You know in Unity, when you see those 999 plus warnings in the bottom corner, and you just play your game anyway because it still works? Well, this was like that, except I actually had to fix all of them because they were errors, and it was a long process. But eventually I got Arenji Monsters into a compilable state, and that was actually the easy part. The real pain came when I had to convert all of my old levels and blueprints into the new scene format. And I wrote code to translate these files, but there were still quite a few edge cases that I needed to manually convert myself. And so this process took some time. It was about a whole month to complete. But eventually Arenji Monsters was running again. And so now that I had Arenji Monsters playable with the latest engine version, all I needed to do was draw the rest of the owl, aka port it to 3DS. And I thought this would be brutal, but actually it wasn't too bad. The first hurdle was VRAM. I was essentially only working with 4 megabytes of VRAM, and when I loaded into battles, textures were completely missing and they just appeared black. So to solve this problem, I added a config option to the engine to limit texture sizes, and I decided on using 128 by 128 as the max texture size, aside from a few special textures like fonts that would ignore this limit. But then there came a handful of smaller issues, some issues with fog, directional lighting, audio volume. All of these were kind of quick to resolve though, and performance-wise, it was actually running pretty smoothly. I'm targeting only the new 3DS for now because the CPU is just way beefier than the original. But on the new 3DS, it was running pretty consistently at 60 FPS. That is until maybe about 5 or so monsters were on the screen, and then it would dip. So, because this might annoy some people, I added the option to cap the frame rate to 30 FPS. And hey, if Donkey Kong Country Returns can run at 30 FPS, and that's a platformer, then I think 30 FPS for Auto Battler is fine. But the most time-consuming part of the port was redesigning the UI for 2 little tiny low-resolution screens. But after writing some hacky code, I was able to get pretty much all of the UI elements working on the 3DS, even if it didn't look that great. And with all that work out of the way, Arenji Monsters is finally playable on 3DS, and you can download it on itch.io. There is a link in the description. And it's definitely not perfect. There are still quite a few bugs. Sometimes I've noticed that monster meshes just vanish, and I think this is actually related to an asynchronous loading bug, but it is really rare. And I've noticed on Android too, so I don't think it's specific to the 3DS. The card animations stop. They might work originally, but then eventually the animations stop playing, but that's not a huge deal. I've noticed like the Pyro Ball spell that the Whelps and the Ember Spirits use sometimes doesn't bounce correctly, and I'm sure there are plenty of other bugs. And if you do play the game, you can report bugs on the Octave Discord, also link in the description below. And eventually I'll release a patch to fix these bugs. If you do play Arenji Monsters, I just have a few tips for you. The first is that you can hold down X to enable turbo mode, which plays the game at 3 times speed, and you can also click the little hourglass icon on the bottom screen to enable it. And then when you're on the overworld, you can hold down X to move quickly between the different levels. There's also a dynamic camera mode, so that if you click the camera diamond icon on the bottom screen that will enable it, and it will automatically track the monsters for you, so you don't have to move the camera yourself, but you're still able to manually control the camera with the right C stick and L and R to zoom in and out. And the last tip is that stage 4 has quite a bit of a difficulty spike, so if you get stuck, just go back to a previous level and play it a couple of times to make sure you can get enough monsters to survive the 10 rounds on stage 4. So like I mentioned earlier, I ported Arenji Monsters to 3DS to prove that Octave can make homebrew games, but that's not the entire story. See, I also see a lot of potential in Arenji Monsters, that is, if I completely redesign it. So halfway through the development, I realized monsters shouldn't be cards. They should be like actual party members, like in Pokemon, where they would gain EXP and level up and learn new skills. Maybe monsters would have individual IVs and EVs or different behaviors, and you could capture new monsters in battles. Okay, I guess this is starting to sound like a Pokemon ripoff with auto battling, but also spells. And so the spells could work maybe more like Mega Man Battle Network, where every 15 or 20 seconds you draw a new hand of cards, and you would use spells in real time while your monsters are fighting. There'd be no turns, there'd be no life crystals or anything. It's just your monsters fighting either wild encounters or other monster tamers or bosses, and you'd be playing spells in real time, which would be a lot more engaging. So yeah, I've been getting really excited about this concept, so maybe it's something I do in the future. It's probably a more realistic game idea in comparison to the MMO I was working on. Yeah, anyway, we'll see. But thank you for watching the video and playing the game. Oh, and thank you to all the kings and queens out there that have starred the Octave game engine on GitHub. We're almost at 300 stars, so that is awesome to see. And in about a week or two, I'll be releasing the next version of the engine, which will have tons of improvements and fixes, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.